everybody. Welcome back to the smooth sounds of WHOOP, Hatening FM. I'm your host, Hoop, and we're back for another hour rock block of today's, okay, we're talking about the radio today, and I came at an impasse where I was going to maybe do like a shock jockey rock thing, but then when I pressed record, it came out as like a sultry evening type of radio host. So, I mean, this is just a testament also to how I don't script out the intros, but I have a general idea as to what I do. It's the Hatening, it's Hoop. We're back again. We're talking about the radio today. Yeah, and the radio fucking rocks. And I really liked the radio for my entire life. And I think that I don't know if the radio is really that big of a deal for people anymore, but damn, I wonder if like my generation, so like, 30-year-olds, we're kind of like the last generation of people who were sort of like raised with the radio. And by that, like, I'm not talking about like War of the World style stuff where like the only type of home entertainment that you had media wise was gathering around like the big old radio or whatever, because like I didn't do any of that stuff, but I mean like in the car and shit, right? Granted, like obviously like we had tapes and CDs, but for the most part, like getting into a vehicle became ubiquitous with like listening to the radio, right? They kind of were like synonymous activities. Like riding in a car meant listening to the radio. Obviously, again, like there were ways to bring your own music to the table, but for the most part, you were listening to the fucking radio, and listening to the radio was my favorite part. Well, listening to music in general was my favorite part about being in the car. But again, like for the most part, it was like the radio, right? And now that, everybody's has like their phones plugged into their cars, like, I don't know, like, is the radio still a big deal? Like, as big of a deal as it was? Like, obviously, people still do listen. Like, I still listen, and I know that there are still, like, prominent radio stations everywhere, right? Like, you're always going to have, like, your NPR affiliates. You're always going to have, like, your rock stations and your hip-hop stations, and then, like, your smooth jazz evening stations and stuff. But, like, I don't know, like, I wonder how long the radio will continue to be, like, a large cultural force before it kind of just like slips away into being sort of like a niche market, right? Or if it won't, you know what I mean? Because at the same time, like television is still here, but everybody has like on-demand apps, yet there's still like cable, I don't know. But obviously I've been thinking about the radio. I mean, I've said on here a million times, I drive for work, right? So I'm in the car around 8 hours a day, give or take, downtime. But for the most part, like, I spend the whole work day in the car, and I listen to podcasts and I listen to music, but like, music like on my phone. But sometimes I get bored of it and I do put on the radio, and I don't know, like I have mixed feelings about the radio now because it's not what I remember being back in the day. Because I feel like, years ago, before music was so on demand and like the portable sense, right? Like there was so much diversity with what you could get on the radio because, from my understanding, like the motherfuckers had to keep your attention because you're fighting with a million fucking other radio stations. So your catalog had to be very broad, like either very broad, like as a catch-all to get everything, or you really had to be churning out nothing but the hits with whatever like genre your station had like dedicated itself to. And by that, like, like now, like all the fucking radio stations are owned by what, Clear Channel or fucking iHeartRadio and whatever the fuck. So like, it's just the same fucking playlist from town to town to town to town, right? And like, so no matter where you are, you're always going to be picking up this same broadcast. It just has like a different local DJ doing like local ads over it and shit, right? Or like cracking wise. But even that, like, these dudes like fucking Ricky Smiley and all them, like, they're nationally syndicated, and obviously national syndication has been a thing. Like, Casey Kasem, who like did American Top 40, which you can still listen to on, I think it's Sunday nights. You can get old broadcasts of that. But like, that shit was so fucking important back in the day. Like, it was such a big fucking deal. It was such like an awesome like cultural mainstay, you know, in America. And I'm keeping it domestic because I don't know a lot about like international radio. Obviously, like, we've all seen pirate radio and understand like, you know, the basics of what pirate radio was. That can be its own thing, I suppose, down the line. I don't know that much about it, but just like, you know, the act of turning on the radio when you're in the car and like going to your favorite station, it tells you a lot about people, and I think it tells you a lot about yourself. And it really, like, I don't know, like, I think that listening to the radio used to be something that was way more important than what it is now. And now it's just kind of like lazily done, aside from like the very few like non-corporate sellout stations, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, every major city, like, I don't know, even like small towns, like, there are still like the local radio stations that have been around forever, and they have like the very like pungent, you know, for lack of a better term, like radio like personalities, and like that shit rocks and I love it. That was always my favorite part of touring, like traveling wise, was like when I was co-pilot, because everyone knows when you're fucking co-pilot, you get to decide the music and shit, right? That's it. You do the navigation, which is the downside, but then the upside is you do the fucking radio, and also you keep the driver awake, you know. And so whenever I was, you know, co-pilot, I would always try to play the local radio stations, because even like, you know, back when I started touring in like 2009, like, you could still travel around the country and get like some local flavor going on, especially at nighttime, right? Like, some of my best tour memories are driving through like Nevada and Utah under the stars, like overnight. So it's like 4 a.m. and you're listening to fucking Coast to Coast, like with fucking George Norrie and all that shit. Like, I wouldn't trade some of those evenings for the fucking world, you know. And part of the reason why it was awesome is because it was on the radio. It was on like a local radio station, even if it was a fucking AM station. Like, you know, like it doesn't hit the same when you listen to the recordings like on their websites and shit. Like, I remember when I was home from college and shit, and when my buddies would all have houses, like, one of the big things we would do if it was like summer and we didn't have jobs and nothing fucking going on, is we would just like sit in the fucking driveway and play fucking radio. But we would always play like a local radio station that would have like, you know, like a swing block, right? And like their oldies programming, or we would try and get like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we would always get like those kind of like more interesting, like non like pop chart stations. And nothing against like pop music. I'm not trying to do that like against pop stations. Like, I definitely will listen to some of the pop stations just like cycling through, but they're just like, the art of curating a radio station's like library, I think, will be lost to time sooner than I'm comfortable with. And I understand that like the idea has adapted because people now have like Spotify playlists and shit. And I get that like there is still like digital radio, and you can argue like podcasts or digital radio, that, you know what I mean? And like, that's not really what I'm talking about, because it feels different. And I think that you know what I mean, even though I'm not like particularly like articulate with this thought. But like, there's something different about just like getting in the car or turning on the radio, and you can't like skip or replay or whatever. And then, you know, there's someone talking, and then they play a couple songs, and then they talk again. Like, that dynamic, I mean, it's an art form, right? And that artistry doesn't translate to modern like media shit, right? Like, and I have tried to get into like internet radio shit where people like curate a playlist and then they like record like a little thing in between, but it just, I don't know. It doesn't hit the same. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't, you know what I mean? It just doesn't do it for me. And I really do, like, I love, like, as corny as they are, like, I love, like, the fucking soundboard heavy, like, bullshit drive time, like, all that stuff. Like, I fucking love it. You know, like, I will listen to the radio in the morning to get the fucking traffic reports. I'll listen to the radio to get, like, I'll even do like financial news or just like the news on the radio, right? Like I really do like listening to the radio, and I would rather do that than like listen to a podcast or like a YouTube channel or something. You know what I mean? Like there's something that's like very relaxing about surfing through the channels, you know, and that's also the same with TV. I can't tell you the last time I like surfed through TV channels, but just like something about just like hitting that scan button on your fucking car radio and hearing like a bunch of different songs, which really doesn't happen anymore now because let's face it, most of the radio stations, unless they're like super niche, play the same shit. But like, you remember being younger and you just surfed through and every fucking station was kind of completely different. And then you would have like all the crazy talk radio. Like talk radio is fucking psycho. They get their own fucking episode. I might have to make that more than one episode too. Cause like, you want to do some wild shit, go to the Midwest and listen to fucking conservative radio and you'll fucking understand why people are the way they are, right? And the same thing like when you go into like bigger cities, like liberal talk radio is a whole fucking thing. Like it's fucking nuts. Like I can't tell you how many nights I would be driving by myself, going wherever, doing whatever, and I'd be bored as fuck and I would turn on like hyper conservative radio back home or like Christian like fucking evangelical radio and shit. Like it's fucking crazy, but it's like really interesting. It's really cool. And also like before we end it, and I think I've said this before, but like one of my favorite ways to digest sports is on the radio. Like I would rather listen to a baseball or especially a football game on the radio than I would like watch it on TV. You know, I really like, it gives me like it really gives me like a dopamine hit that like I can't explain and I can't really replicate. It's like kind of nostalgia, and it's kind of like, I don't even know what it is. I honestly, like, I cannot explain it. It's very beautiful to me, like internally. And I know that might sound weird, but like listening to sports on the radio, it might be like some weird, like throwback to when I was a kid and I would listen to like sports broadcasts with my family or something. You know what I mean? Like shit that I don't remember like consciously, but it's like buried deep inside my id. But like, listening to sports on the radio, no matter what it is, like makes me feel so warm and fuzzy. Like it really is like one of the most comforting things, and I fucking love it so much. But I love the radio and the artistry attached to it, and I'm really convinced that like it's a dying art form. Like it will never go away completely, but long gone are the days where like the local DJ held any sort of like cultural significance. You know what I'm saying? Like we're never going to go back to there where like one of the big arbiters of culture in your fucking city and the people who could make or break your career if you were a musician or whatever was the local DJ, trying to get them to fucking spin your record, right? Like that's not going to fucking happen anymore. But also this episode's not going to happen anymore because we're fucking done. Thank you so much for listening to The Hatening. Andrew and I appreciate it so much. We really fucking do. We love you guys very much. If you like the show, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out so much if you take the fucking 3 seconds to like this show and give it a good review. You can, or tell your friends too. That would be great. That'd be fucking awesome. People have been. I got a really, really nice message today from someone who said the show was recommended to them and they could relate to the topics, and it made me very emotional. I'm not going to admit that I cried, but I thought about it. It's very rewarding to have something that you actually give a shit about pay off, which happens very rarely, I feel. You can find The Hatening on all social media platforms. From there, you can find the profiles for myself and Andrew. Hit us up, like us, all that bullshit. Message us, please do it. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. Don't forget to tell your friends you love them. Good night, Seattle.